welcome everyone. This is the panel on Diversifying ACM Award nominations. I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. I am Vicki Hansen. I'm a former president of ACM, and I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer. Over my career, I've served in various capacities for ACM. Some of them are relevant to this particular event. So for example, I was chair of SIG Access, ACM's special interest group on accessible computing. I was also the founder and initial editor-in-chief of the Journal for Transactions on Accessible Computing. And let me just say a little bit more about ACM. ACM is the world's oldest and largest computing society. We have members all around the world. We are a professional and educational society. We have hundreds of conferences around the world, and we service the research community through our conferences and publications. Okay. And let's see, I'll have everybody else here introduce themselves. Roy, you're sitting closest to me, so do you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Roy Levin. My background is as a researcher and a manager of research in corporate research labs. I've actually been a member of ACM since I was an undergraduate, which is very many years ago. I was at one point the chair of SIGOps, but in recent years my primary involvement with ACM has been through its history committee and most recently the awards program, for which I am co-chair.
Stephanie?
Hi, my name is Stephanie Ludi, and I'm a faculty member in computer science. And my work involving research and teaching is in accessibility and software engineering and human-computer interaction. I have also been involved in ACM for quite a while. I've been a member since I was an undergraduate. Recent roles have included my being editor-in-chief for Transactions on Accessible Computing. I was a TPC last year for Assets, which is the conference for SIG Access, as well as my current role as chair for the DEI Council.
And Timothy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Timothy Pinkston. I am a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Southern California. I also serve in an administrative role as vice dean in the Viterbi School of Engineering. I have volunteered for a number of awards committees, including for the ACM Grace Murray Hopper Award Committee as a member and chair of that committee. I've also served as a member and chair of the ACM SIG Arch Computer Architecture Distinguished Service Award Committee. And I've served on other committees as well, such as the ACM Heidelberg Laureate Forum Selection Committee. I, like others, have volunteered in a number of other capacities. As it relates to being a nominator, I've been a nominator and also been a recipient of various awards, an endorser of awards, and I'm pleased to have been an ACM Fellow, nominated and elevated to ACM Fellow. It's my pleasure to be here on this esteemed panel with these colleagues.
Okay, thank you. So again, the title of the panel is Diversifying ACM Award Nominations. And so the first question I want to ask to all three of you is, why is it important for ACM to get diverse award nominations? And I'll start with Roy on this one.
Well, I think the answer is really, for me, is very simple. That is, diverse nominations mean diverse awards. Diverse awards means we're representing the entire community of researchers, practitioners, educators, everyone who's in ACM. So if we want to be inclusive of our community, you have to have diverse award nominations.
And Stephanie? Yeah.
Well said. I wanted to also add that these are very prestigious awards and in some cases also the member grades as well. And people do a lot of wonderful things in terms of their work all over the world. And it would be great to be able to recognize those efforts as part of the community for ACM in our awards and advanced member grades as well.
Timothy? Yeah.
I echo those sentiments. Beyond the honor and prestige of that the award bestows, awards enable the recipient to be able to participate in perhaps leadership roles or perhaps on award committees themselves, serve as nominators, serve as endorsers for some awards, for instance, the ACM Fellow. And so by having a diverse set of nominations through which hopefully for high quality nominations, we have a more diverse set of awardees, then that enables more persons to serve in these higher roles and on committees to, in some ways, reduce what's been called the service tax, or perhaps a burden of underrepresentation for persons who are from populations underrepresented in STEM fields and in computing. By having more persons in the pool who can serve in leadership roles and serve on committees and serve as nominators for the good and well-intentioned reason of having diverse perspectives on such committees, then by having more nominations, more awardees, that reduces in some sense the burden or the service tax on persons who would otherwise be asked to serve on such committees and participate in leadership roles. So it's good all around for those who would be participate on committees, broaden the set of persons who are represented from the community to serve on committees, broaden the field, and perhaps in some ways inspire others to achieve awards and broaden the field to have excellence to go across the field of computing, our computing field, with more persons aspiring for awards, knowing that this is achievable.
Okay, great. Stephanie already alluded to the fact that these awards are very prestigious. Can you say a little bit more about this, Roy? I mean, we're kind of assuming that people who are listening to this want to get ACM awards, but why is it important? Or what kind of prestige, honor does it bring to the individual people, to their institutions, that kind of thing? Can you say?
I think the prestige aspect of it is in large measure within our field, because most of these awards are known within the field. Some are more widely known, for example, the Turing Award, which is known worldwide and well outside the computing field, but most of them are known well within the field. So the prestige is there. It's a celebration of work, very simply. People do excellent stuff and they get recognized for it with the awards. That's where I see the real benefit.
Yeah. Sorry. Either of you want to elaborate on that at all?
I think the thing that I would also add is that whether it be the higher awards that ACM offers or the myriad of other awards that are at ACM at various levels, is it allows for the celebration of work in various contexts. I mean, there are awards for early career, for mid-career, for later accomplishments, for in various ways, as well as across the board, and it really allows for that celebration of that, and to bring diversity into that, I think really pushes the whole community forward.
It's been alluded to already that we have excellence cuts across our field, across a number of different dimensions, whether it's racial, ethnic, or gender, or geographical, or topical areas. We have excellence within our computing community and with people, I think, very worthy of being nominated and hopefully being chosen for awards. So there's a prestige and honor that can be inspiring for a broader swath of our community with having more persons to be nominated and hopefully awarded awards. So, yeah.
Okay. And with those sort of introductory comments, I wanted to say that the purpose of this session is to get more people involved in making nominations for ACM Awards, particularly more diverse nominations for ACM Awards. ACM is often criticized when awards are announced that the awards are going to predominantly white men. Well, people will look at people they know and say, this person is excellent, why didn't this person win the award? They're deserving. The actual answer to that is usually that that person never got nominated. So we're here to stress the importance of nominating candidates that you think are deserving of the awards and to really increase the diversity of the nomination pool. So when these awards committees meet, they don't just pick the name of a winner sort of at random out of the air. They have a set of nominated candidates that they're looking at, and they select the award recipient from among the nominations that they get. So if you think that there's someone who deserves one of these awards, it's up to you as a community, maybe not you personally, but up to you as a community to submit the names of these people so that they can be considered for awards. And we'll be talking through the process of all that today. So my goals, I put a list of goals here for what we want to go through today. We want to get people thinking about who might be good candidates for the awards. We want to encourage you to submit nominations to ACM for ACM Awards, SIG Awards, and member grades. And we want to give you information about how to do these nominations, sorry. And we want to give you tips for making these nominations successful, all right? So before I do that, we have just a few housekeeping tips to go through. This only applies for the people who are in the audience. You'll see that there's Slido information on the sides. If you have questions to ask, submit your questions through Slido. Also, you'll see right behind all of us here, there's a QR code. That will lead you to a page on ACM's website that gives a lot of very good information for nominators and endorsers, and much of what we're going to be saying here is also available on that website, so you can have a good way of looking it up there. And the third thing is that this session is being recorded. Those who are here in the room can see that there's the recording going on in the back. This recording will be made available on ACM's website, so you can watch it again, or you can tell your friends to watch it. In order to see it, it will be on ACM's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council webpage on ACM's website. So go to acm.org and search for DEI Council, and you will find the recording of this very shortly. As soon as we get the recording, we will caption it and make it available on the DEI website. Okay? All right. So let's start talking a little bit about the process. And the first question's for Roy. You made the mistake of sitting next to me, so you get all the first questions. Okay. There's really two categories of recognition that are covered in the awards committee. So you're the overall awards committee co-chair, and you handle both what's called ACM awards and member grades. So can you tell us a little bit about the difference between awards and member grades?
Yes. I actually want to distinguish a third category, which is separate from what we think of as the ACM level awards program, and that is the vast number of SIG level awards. The special interest groups, of which there are 35 or so, have literally more than 100 distinct awards that they give. And while the awards program oversees that activity at a distance, it's mostly managed by the SIGs themselves and by the SIG governing board. At the ACM level, we make this distinction, as you said, between awards and advanced member grades. There are about 25 awards at this level, each of which has its own awarding committee, as Vicki mentioned. And the advanced member grades, of which there are 3, senior member, distinguished member, and fellow, also each have an award committee. The important distinction there is that member grade really is that. It's a recognition of a certain level of achievement within ACM as an ACM member. Awards, by contrast, in fact, can be given to anyone in the field. And they don't even have to be ACM members. and that actually does happen. The advanced member grade is open to anyone who meets the qualifications, the criteria for each grade, whereas awards, typically a single award is given each year. So it's a very different kind of thing, but because of the similarities in process with committees to make the decisions, we manage them under the same umbrella.
Okay. Yes, Tim.
Can I add that Roy did a good job of explaining the various member grades and the other awards. You have to start somewhere, right? And one can try to shoot for becoming an ACM fellow, of course, at any time, but perhaps a methodical step-by-step approach might be useful and be effective. So start from member grade and then become a senior member. I think you need to be a senior member for some number of years, 5 years, in order to be eligible for the distinguished member or fellow. You don't have to be a distinguished member first before becoming a fellow, but that is another, rank in the ladder of things. So why not go for this distinguished member at an appropriate time if you feel qualified and others feel as though you are. And then later the ACM fellow. And likewise, for some of the other awards, the 25 that you mentioned, perhaps by getting a track record of getting honors and awards within ACM and other fields, that can work to your benefit and advantage in going for some of the other awards as well. Would you agree, Roy?
Yeah, Roy.
Yes, you mentioned something that I wanted to elaborate on. At the ACM level, the awards fall into a few different categories, and it's important to recognize that they're not just all kind of the same thing. There are, well, I think the Turing Award comes as sort of a special case because it's the oldest award that we have. We've been giving it for more than 50 years. It was obviously the first one created. ACM was still fairly young when it was created. And it's become a highly influential award in the field. When that decision comes out, it makes newspapers everywhere. And that's an award that typically is presented to someone relatively far along in their career because it represents a very high level of impact. Of course, you can, in principle, have that early in your career, and it has happened, but it's usually given to someone who's been around for a while. There are two other awards that we have that are more or less tied to career stages. The Grace Mary Hopper Award, which is an early career stage, early to mid-career, and the ACM Prize in Computing, which is more a middle stage career achievement award. And the level of impact is correspondingly tied to those career stages. We also have a number of awards that are in technical special areas, like, for example, the Alan Newell Award, which is in AI, the Paris Kanellakis Theory and Practice Award, which, as its name says, is about theory and its implications. And then there were a number of service awards as well, such as the Fran Allen Mentoring Award, which is quite newly created, the Athena Lecturer Award, the Distinguished Service Award, and several others. So there are different award categories.
And may I ask, also add, that Steph had also mentioned this, that there's these different early career, mid-career, and senior, as Roy was just talking about. At the SIG level, the same applies, right? So there are early career awards at the SIG level. It's the special interest group levels. In my area, SIG Arch for architecture, SIG Micro. Mid-career awards, so Young Computer Architect Award or something like that. Mid-career awards, more senior awards, Maurice Wilkes Award, Eckerd Mauchly Award. So there are these different levels that, again, getting a track record of getting some of these awards. Even if you aren't successful, you can be nominated through the nomination process. You can then become even better at, or the nominators and you as a nominee can understand better about some of the qualifications, some of the standards and criteria, and how best to shape the story to be even more competitive for those awards and for later awards. Would you agree, Stephanie?
Definitely. And it was well put to me by a Turing Award winner that when one gets the Turing Award, it's not the first award one gets. So certainly by, you have in your career opportunities, as was stated, in terms of SIG level, or whether it be technical service or other levels, and of course at ACM itself, as well as other areas as well outside of ACM. So certainly there's a lot of opportunity for someone to build their track record, to build their reputation, as well as the other aspects of their career, to be able to prepare themselves to shoot for those really high-level awards.
Okay, great. So a question for you, Stephanie, about the DEI Council. Who all does ACM's DEI Council serve? What different groups of people? How broadly is the mission of the council? What are some of your priorities, in particular, if you could discuss the priority related to awards and member grades?
Sure, thank you. So with the ACM DEI Council, while some of what we do can be front-facing to the community at large, we definitely, a lot of our mission is across ACM broadly. And so with that, we do engage with all aspects of ACM, which includes areas such as the SIGs, digital library, pubs, and other areas to be able to best support diversity, equity, and inclusion across ACM, which in turn supports our membership as well as demonstrates out to the broader community the efforts that we have to try to bring DEI in all aspects to computing. And so when we look at awards, that has been one of the areas that has been a priority for us in terms of how to best support that. And one of the things that we have found is that after some discussion and reaching out to different areas within ACM, including an awards committee, is that we want to make sure there's an infrastructure. So it's not something as simple as, oh, we want to nominate someone, because that really isn't impactful and it's very narrow. But instead, we want to really have the infrastructure in place to help others nominate. And so one of the things that we have to go along with that we piloted last year was a Shepherd's program. So that way, in the case of last year, for a small number of awards, someone had people they could ask that have either won the award or been a part of the committee, who are familiar with the nomination process. So that way, if it was their first time or they otherwise needed some support during the process, they had someone to reach out to in supplement to the other resources available, with the idea of helping to diversify the nomination pool. That's only one area of work that we do, but certainly that's one that will have, as we move forward, a large impact. At least that's the idea with increasing the nomination pool. Other areas of work, just really quickly, that we also do are things related to supporting the greater community in terms of best practices, bringing together panels for different areas of Heritage or Awareness Months to be able to connect the next generation of computing professionals, as well as those already in the pipeline, with those that have walked before them, to be able to really connect and to be able to diversify the membership as well as just computing. We have basically about 4 or 5 priorities that we work on every year. There are things that carry from year to year, awards being one of them.
I think that's great. I would hope that people who are listening to this would make full use of this resource that you're providing, Steph, in the ACM DEI Council. I think last year you mentioned it's a pilot. Mm-hmm. I think the Grace Murray Hopper Award was one of those that you would allow for shepherding, and I was chair of the committee at the time. And Athena Lecturer, is that correct?
Yes.
And
yes.
then maybe there's 1 or 2 others that.
Carl Karlstrom Award as well.
What was it?
The Carl Karlstrom Award.
Right. So that was the 3 that you focused on. Perhaps will it be broader than that this coming year, or will that be the focus this year for those which are somewhat mid-career kind of awards? Is that correct?
We are looking to expand it. And so one of the things this year is that we are looking to cover almost all of the higher level ACM awards. One of the reasons for that is certainly to expand it at that point. But as we do that, not only do we want to be impactful as in terms of the nomination for those awards, but we also want to kind of work out the process and resources to then be able to share those with the SIGs. So that way they can turn around and have this be impactful for their own awards as well, to supplement or augment work that they are already doing to do so.
Member grades is not one of those that's the council is looking at, is that correct?
It would be included, but we are kind of doing it in an incremental fashion, just to make sure that we are able to cover the need that we need to have in terms of the resources for people to be able to have someone to talk to. We want to make sure that we staff that accordingly.
Okay, I actually have a lot of questions here. Some of them are related to things that we just covered. So I want to go through something quickly. Do you have to be a certain member grade to be nominated for ACM Awards?
No.
Exactly.
Don't even have to be an ACM member.
Exactly. They're completely separate processes.
That's right.
You might want
That's
to
right.
emphasize that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then there was the can you skip a grade in the member process? And absolutely, Timothy spoke to that, right? You don't have to start at senior member and go to distinguished to get fellow. You can just go right to the fellow nomination if you're qualified for that, right? Looking through all the questions, there's a lot of questions here. How is the criteria for senior and distinguished member different? And can you allow self-nominations? I'll put that in there.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
relevant.
So let me deal with the last thing first. Senior member is, in fact, primarily self-nomination. It's an exception in our processes. In general, nominations come from somebody other than the nominee. But for senior member, that's not the case. Senior member, you can nominate yourself. All of the advanced member grades have a membership term requirement. You have to have been a member for a certain number of years over a certain period of time, in addition to the criteria about impact, which are detailed on the website. So the criteria, as you would expect, become more expansive as you go up the hierarchy.
Yeah. Okay.
Would it be fair to say that most people who are doing well in their career, whether it's in industry or academia, after the time period of 5 years, would likely be elevated to senior member? In other words, would you encourage most people in this audience attending TAPIA who would qualify in terms of the years, assuming that they are making good progress, to self-nominate or be nominated for senior member?
Yes, I would. And maybe this is a good time to say that when the Fellows Program was started, which was the first of the member grades, the other two were advanced member grades, the other two were added later. The idea was that it would encompass about 1% of ACM members. So there are roughly 100,000 ACM members, professional members, I should say, worldwide. So roughly 1,000 of them. In fact, that hasn't been viewed as a hard limit. I think we have something like 1,300 fellows or so at the moment. When distinguished member was added, the idea was that it would be about 10% of ACM professional members. And for senior, it was more like 25%. But I want to emphasize what you said, Tim, that if you've been a member for 5 years and you're making good progress, it's probably worth looking at nominating yourself for senior member.
Because that opens the doors for other things. For
yes.
sure.
And once again, it's not a required step, but it can be viewed as a stepping stone, if you like.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a quick question for Stephanie. So ACM for a long time has been really working to advance women in the computing profession, but the mission of the DEI Council is larger than that. Can you say a little bit more about who else you're working to advance in computing?
Definitely. So as was mentioned, for a long time, gender was the focus, but certainly as time has gone on, really it's various facets in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and so that can include not only gender, but geographic location. It could include certainly in terms of topic area, in terms of what one covers in terms of their work, certainly also in terms of ethnic background, gender diversity beyond men and women, and also includes persons with disabilities as well, to name just a few. So we definitely take that to be very seriously in the DEI Council, as well as ACM taking that very seriously as well, to reflect that. Because we look at that not only in terms of the makeup of the council itself, but also in terms of the activities that we have. So when we have things like panels, for example, we take a lot of time and effort to try to balance out, are people from academia or industry, are they in North America or in other areas of the world, different places in their career, the focus of their work, and so on. And so there are a lot of parts to balance. And so I will not say that it is an easy item, but it is very important. And so we do put the time and effort in to doing that as a way of certainly reflecting that outward to the community at large, as well as to show other areas of ACM the importance of that and how that can manifest, and to work with them so that way they could also support their work in trying to reflect this diversity and inclusion as well.
Okay, so let's start looking at the nomination process itself, because I've had some questions about how extensive is the work involved in nominating somebody through the Slido. Basically, what does it take the first step would be finding someone to nominate. And how do people go about thinking of the nomination process? I know there's different ways. And how do they sort of level set whether the person that they think might be worthy of an award or an advanced member grade, how do they get a sense of whether that person really would be qualified or is at the right level to be considered for one of these?
For me?
Yeah, it's for you, Roy. I'm
okay.
Looking at you. Yep.
So oftentimes people will think, gee, I think I'm eligible for that award. Now all I have to do is find somebody to nominate me. So that's kind of one way it happens. Another way it happens is as an individual or maybe as part of a committee, you're aware of someone who you think is deserving of an award. And that person may not have thought about it or even approached you, but you decide that that would be a good thing to do. So you might call those bottom up and top down, but it doesn't really matter what you call them. There's sort of two ways to get started. In either case, you have to go and find a nominator at that point. In the second case, where there's, you identify somebody that you think is worthy of an award, you could be the nominator yourself. Or sometimes, and this was the case when I was working in industry, there'll actually be an organizational committee whose job it is to identify people within the organization and then to find people who could nominate them. So there's that way to do it. If you're an individual where you would like to get yourself nominated by someone, a natural person to approach is someone who knows you and knows your work. Someone who's a more senior colleague, perhaps in your department or in your professional organization, whatever it is. Or it might have been someone that knew you from some time in the past, but with whom you've kept contact. It's important that the nominator be familiar with your work. You asked about level setting. How do you decide whether it's appropriate for you to be considered for an award? And there, I think the easiest way to do that is to rely on two sets of information that are published. One is the criteria for the award itself. You can read about what the award is given for, and while that may be fairly broad in some cases, it at least gives you a sense of what the parameters are. And then to try to take that perhaps broad description and apply it, you can go back and look at the people who have previously won that award in the past, look at the citations for which they were awarded the award, and that'll give you a sense of the caliber of the work or service or whatever that the award recognizes.
Okay. I'd just like to add one thing. You said that when you were in industry, there were committees that got together and
Yes.
nominated people. Within ACM, people in Europe felt that they weren't getting enough attention in awards. They weren't people weren't receiving awards, getting the member grades, and same with India. And so in both Europe and India, fairly recently, they've formed committees and they've had a lot more success in getting their people through. So it really does require some effort in thinking about who to nominate. The people are there, again, they just have to find someone to do the nominations for them, right?
Yes.
I wanted to follow up on that. So, you know, at a lot of universities, for example, there are committees in the department or the college for student awards and scholarships. For their purpose internally for those types of things. Some departments or colleges, especially if they're a college of computing, may have a committee for faculty. Some don't. And for those that don't, it certainly is an opportunity to have a committee, whether it be, you know, a standard committee that people have terms and all that, or certainly an ad hoc one that's easier perhaps to create internally to be able to support that. And so that way it's just part of the way of operating in your department is to be able to evaluate, you know, annually or per cycle who would be eligible and be able to then have that as part of the process to increase nominations.
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
Specifically, we have an award, the Doctoral Dissertation Award, and that really does need to be sorted out at the department level because we will only accept one or, in some cases, two nominations from a given department. So that's a natural place for a departmental committee to be formed anyway to recognize PhD dissertations.
Good point.
Yeah. So, Roy, you mentioned getting nominators. What are some good criteria for a nominator? Who makes a good nominator?
Well, as I already mentioned, it should be somebody who knows the person to be nominated. Otherwise, you end up with an award that's, a nomination that's somehow distant, right? It's best to have someone who is aware of the nominee's work and of the impact that it's had. Operationally, it has to be someone who is going to follow through on a number of details. As we'll probably talk about later, you also need endorsements for nomination, and it's the job of the nominator to go out and find endorsers and to badger them to write the letters that need to be written. I mean, people in academia are usually fairly familiar with this kind of process, although the endorsement letters that we require are quite different from a recommendation letter for, say, tenure or something. So the nominator has to be an organized person, somebody who can say, oh, good, there's this deadline coming up in 3 months, and follow through.
Right. So, Timothy, from your perspective as a committee, being on the committee and serving as chair of one of them, what can you say about how the nominators can make or break an application?
Thank you for the question. I second all that Roy just mentioned. Let's call it 3 levels. So there's the committee nomination from the committee's perspective, then there's a nominator's perspective, then there's the nominee's perspective, sort of taking the top-down approach from the bottom up that you started with, Roy. So from the committee's perspective, part of the job of the committee is to oftentimes to solicit nominations or solicit nominators for nominees. This is an important role. And of course, we want to cast net widely to make sure there's a diversity along many dimensions: racial, ethnic, gender, geographical, topical areas, and other areas, as Steph was talking about. So the committee itself is trying to solicit excellent nominations, hopefully broadly, aspirationally to hit a broad swath of our computing community. And so the committee knows the criteria and the standards. And so if they are seeking, out nominators for potential nominees, there's some pre-vetting, if you will, of the potential nominees. Not to say it's a slam dunk or a guarantee, but there is, let's say they're on the watch list, these nominees, and so there is an effort put towards trying to solicit excellent nominators for those outstanding nominees. In some of the committees I've been on, we've actually been successful in getting, reaching out to people to serve as nominators and then to nominate persons who have actually gotten the award. So there's that element that it's good if a committee member reaches out to you to serve as a nominator or to nominate people, please take them up on that. We don't always get people to follow through, but if so, that nominee is in a good, strong position because the committee has already sort of noted someone who likely would be a good nominator and someone who would likely be a good nominee. From the nominator's perspective, many of the nominators themselves have either received that award or have served on the committee for those awards, or are very familiar with the award criteria, if not the standards, from colleagues, knowing people who received awards and being mature in the field to have a good sense of what's needed, what could how to put forward a strong nomination. So if you are approached by someone who wishes to nominate you, again, my advice is to take them up on the offer because there's some level of knowledge and perhaps some vetting that the nominator may have done to know that to select you as someone that they would be willing to nominate. From the nominee's perspective, I'll take a soccer analogy. You can't score unless you shoot. And so by all means, put yourself in positions to be nominated. Solicit people perhaps to nominate you. Again, people who you trust, who will be dependable, who will have follow through, people who are acquainted and knowledgeable about your area of work and your accomplishments, someone who can tell a good story, someone who could paint the picture and highlight your accomplishments relative to the award itself. And so if you have faith in someone, perhaps your mentor or department chair or supervisor or other administrator or manager, again, don't be bashful, go after ask them. And oftentimes people would be willing to nominate you or to tell you straightforward, hey, maybe not this year, maybe the next year, but let's do these kinds of things to get you in a better position to have a successful nomination. So if trusted people who are dependable, perhaps your mentor, I think those are things that one should consider. So from the committee's perspective, I don't know if you wanted me to talk about it now in terms of what we look for in nominations.
Yeah,
Or do you want to?
Well, I was sort of going to go to that bit next. Roy had a comment on something.
I just wanted to add a little bit to what you said. From a nominee's point of view, it's a collaboration with the nominator. This is not some fence that you throw your information over and that's it. The nominator, it's perfectly reasonable for the nominator to ask the nominee for who would be credible endorsers, who knows your work besides me, the nominator. And it is important that the nominator write the nomination. No ghostwriting is permitted, no chatbots. But it can be that the nominee helps the nominator create the nomination at a high level.
I fully agree. If I can just make it a bit personal, Many, if not most, of the honors and awards that I've received, including from the ACM, I initiated with the nominators, people who would nominate me, and I played a role in trying to help be as helpful and supportive of them as I can be by providing, breakdown of my work, highlighting certain things, providing whatever information that could be useful to them to make it easy for them to be able to write up the nomination. The nomination needs to be written in that nominator's voice. They are the final author, but I agree that the nominee can certainly be very helpful and should be helpful in making sure that the nomination will portray things that they think should be portrayed. They aren't the final word, but they do play a role.
Okay, we are just about out of time, so I have hopefully two questions that I could ask very quickly, questions that came in on Slido. I want to know how much work it is to write a nomination, and not just the work itself, but my understanding is that it's very critical that you explain the work of the person in great detail, because you can't assume that the person you're nominating is known to the committee and their specific contribution may not even be known to the committee, because the committee can have only a few people on it, and they're asked to evaluate people in many different fields. So in 10 seconds, Roy, can you say something about that?
Yes, I would say that everything you say is correct. Nominations typically can be divided into the accomplishment that is supposed to be recognized and the impact that that accomplishment has had. The sort of the what and the what happened as a result of it. And the nomination needs to make both of those clear. The endorsers need to speak to those two things from their personal knowledge. So that's the essential material in there. And there was another part to your question, which I have already forgotten.
No, I said there were two questions. I didn't ask the second one. We're technically out of time, but.
We started late. Hopefully we can be able to say a few more things. I just want to add to what Roy said. It's important to say about what is the accomplishments of the nominee, but also why are those accomplishments important? What's the significance and the impact? And then to tie the knot, that is to then tie that to the award itself. How does what the accomplishments are and why they're important, how does it tie to this particular award? What this particular criteria of the award, what it says is needed for this particular award. So it's important for those connections to be made, and for the endorsers to give their firsthand knowledge, their personal touch, to not repeat things from the CV or from the nomination, but rather to give the text, the context, texture, insights, the nuances, to highlight, to tell the big picture view that's in the nomination, but to go in deep. The endorsers would go deep on one or two of the particular aspects of contributions that the person has made that sets them apart.
Right. Critical. Thank you. Thank you for adding that. We had a couple questions come in on Slido. One asking if the awards nomination differed in any way globally from what is being talked about here. And the second is whether there's anything different about nominations from industry versus academia. I think that's a quick answer, Roy, isn't it?
Yes. The first one is easy. Globally, no. Aside from the fact that the nominations need to be in English, which is actually a significant issue for dissertations, but we provide for that. What was the second half of your question? Sorry.
Difference in industry. Is there a difference in industry and academia for the nominations?
Yes. Inevitably, there will be some difference because the nature of the work and the nature of the impact tends to be different in industry. Sometimes it's challenging for industry to make the case because of proprietariness considerations in companies. But usually people can find a way to talk about the stuff in a way that doesn't make the lawyers unhappy and at the same time gets across to the committee what the accomplishment was and what the impact has been. usually by the time something has made it into a product that millions of people are using, you can talk about it, at that level at least. So whereas the academic ones, there tends to be more of a variety, there tends to be more emphasis on things like research publication than there is in industry. But both make sense.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so with that, I'm going to conclude. And Timothy's raising his finger again. Yes.
Can we give a final statement or concluding
All
statement?
we can do is cut the video off.
Okay, go ahead. So make a final statement, Timothy.
Okay, sure. I just wanted to say that I think it's important for us to recognize and state that it's possible to have a diverse set of nominations without compromising quality. There are high quality people who are well accomplished on the way up who broaden diversity of nominations. Excellence is enhanced and enabled by diversity and inclusion. We have to dispel the myth that excellence is somehow diminished or compromised by diversity and inclusion. A person who may come from a minoritized population or a non-traditional background may have encountered challenges or barriers that make them a very strong, allow them to make very strong contributions in ways that perhaps otherwise they wouldn't have, and to be able to contribute in ways that are important to our community. So, and by having such a person to be recognized through nominations and hopefully through awards, it can lift all boats. It can help everybody in our community to see that they can also achieve. So it is possible, I firmly believe, to have diverse nominations that maintain and even increase quality and excellence in our community.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
I don't know if you could hear Roy.
I couldn't agree more.
Okay, Steph, did you have a final comment?
Definitely +1 for me as well. I mean, I don't think I could say it better.
Okay, I want to thank you all, and I'm glad that we were able to be here. Just to let you know, ACM has been a sponsor of the Tapia Conference since its very first year in 2001. We were absolutely thrilled to be able to come back here and present this information now. And I hope we have encouraged some of you to submit more diverse applications for the ACM Awards and member grades. So thank you. That's it from us.
Yes.